All right, it's 3 p.m. and we will call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. If I could please have a roll call.
Freeman.
Here.
Amobian.
Here.
Malik.
Here.
Baylor.
Here.
Lombardo.
Aye.
All committee members are present.
Thank you, Ms. Biviano. If I could have a motion to accept the minutes from our last meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very, very much. All right, we have 2 items on our old agenda, and then we have 2 new items in our new agenda, and so we will come to our first item here, and this is our resolution adopting an annual operating budget for the fiscal year 2023, declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker.
Right, so both of the existing pieces that have been, I believe this is the 4th reading on both the budget resolution and the appropriation ordinance. We would like to proceed with those. We have given council some additional information over the weekend, including the overtime. So basically what the overtime file shows is that we're trying to budget overtime, at a similar level to what we did in 2021. So it's just slightly higher than 2021, less than what we spent last year. So we're trying to kind of get the overtime back to a level that we were a couple years ago.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, come to you if you'd like to offer something.
No, I know we've had those discussions before, and I think the resolution hopefully assuages some of those concerns around, I think, a well-talked-about piece of part of the budget language that we've been using for a significant number of years, but we've made a pledge to be able to, I think there's some concern around some of the contractual things that we have done, tried to unwind those, but taken, and I think it's actually part of the resolution to be part of that, taken a couple of months to kind of see what are the emergencies about how we're doing some of the personal service stuff on that to be able to hopefully address council's concerns. Obviously, there's a charter obligation to pass the budget by the end of the month, and what we don't want to do is get to a certain or particular point where in looking through that, there's not a whole lot to do after that. And so passing this budget obviously is imperative tonight, and getting it out of committee and to making sure all of those city services that we have come to rely on and depend on, and our residents depend on in a non-emergency or whether it's entertainment or anything, to make sure those are funded by the end of the week. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'll first open up any questions to members of the committee. Mr. Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Less of a question, more of a comment. First, want to thank the Finance Department for all the work over the last few weeks and really over the whole year to put together a budget like this and their responsiveness with answering questions. I appreciate that the medical debt relief is being included in this. I think that's a really significant step, and I think we'll hear more from the folks who help with that. I also appreciate the technology upgrades for housing being included. I think that's also an important step that we identified through our housing focus team and working with city housing. With that being said, I don't think it's surprising to anyone. I don't think I can support the budget with the Section 56 language in it unchanged. We've had a lot of discussion about this over the last few weeks, and the scale of the amount of money being spent on these contracts that council isn't reviewing is pretty significant. And when I've talked to residents over the last few weeks, they're clear to me that council should not be abdicating our responsibility under the charter to review each and every contract over $50,000, especially when the amount of money is over $100 million spent over the last 2 years. And I think particularly with the lack of a policy or procedure that says what a personal service or special service is, it essentially can become a loophole that things can be avoided being brought to council. We can pick and choose what is brought to council. And so I appreciate that the administration is going to work on, coming up with changes. But if the administration is committing not to bring special service contracts over $50,000 to council, then I see little use in retaining that language in here while we work on coming up with a change, right? So I can't support it as it is. Fundamentally, I think, it comes down to trust. We are all trying to preserve, I think everyone in this room is trying to preserve trust in government at a time when it's very tough to do that. And I think this is an area in which we as council have a strong responsibility to play an accountability role when it comes to contracts and finances. And we abdicated that responsibility when it came to ARPA, and I strongly advocated against that. This is another area in which we are advocating a pretty significant responsibility. And so I just want to make clear where I stand on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions from committee members, so any other council members in the chambers might have questions or comments? Okay, do I have a motion to...
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Oh,
to
I'm
inter-
sorry, I did not see your hand. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share many of the concerns that have been expressed by Councilman Malik. I want to bring it to a fine point. Our ability to trust as humans in all contexts is largely tied to our ability to see and to understand. The problem with Section 56 is that fundamentally it prevents the public from being able to see and to understand how, in some instances, very large dollar expenditures are being undertaken and why. The suggestion here is not that these have been bad expenditures, not at all. Quite the contrary. The suggestion, rather, is that in 1920, our city charter was created to make clear that the citizens of Akron wanted and needed and deserved an opportunity to see and understand why spending decisions over a certain dollar amount were being made. Now, this decision was reiterated a number of different times during the course of the city charter's history, most recently in 2020. So there's really very little wiggle room for the suggestion that this can or should be studied or revisited because we just did this in 2020. A city charter review commission was formed and included some of the brightest minds in our city. Now, while I appreciate that there are circumstances under which an emergency could or has already arisen, there are also ways that we can provide this ability to see and understand spending decisions. Part of that is built in to Section 95 of the city charter and speaks to the idea of contracts over $50,000 requiring council approval. Now, as it happens, since the last time we all met in this room to talk about this issue, I submitted a couple of suggested possible other ways to go here. And I think that what concerns me is that I didn't get a real answer back. My concern about forming a discussion group or some sort of research group is that the research is done. The research has been discussed over and over again in our budget sessions. And respectfully, the research is simple. There is a city charter. There is an ordinance that I think, to some degree, was, readopted year after year after year, without malice, without some sort of evil intent, but adopted, nevertheless, without any particular regard to what it might mean. Most specifically and most recently, it meant $120 million in contracting for services that did not meet this idea of allowing the public to see and understand. Now, this seat is not mine. This seat belongs to the citizens of Ward 1, approximately 20,000 people, give or take. Soon enough, they'll make a decision if they want me to continue being their spokesperson, and that's how the process works. But as a citizen of Ward 1 myself, I will always want to be able to see and understand how spending decisions are made. What I've heard from the residents of Ward 1 over the past few weeks is that this matters, that this is not necessarily something to be studied, it's something to be addressed right now, that this really matters for a family that's struggling with something like medical debt, that this is the kind of decision-making process that is painful to folks who are already struggling to make ends meet, that they need and want a sense that they are part of, that they are being included, and that they are allowed to see and understand. And it is for all these reasons that while I am deeply grateful that there is now there are a couple of items included in this operating budget, both very much needed in this city, both the medical debt relief item, but also the technology for housing. While I'm glad to see those there, as it stands, respectfully, I'm unable to support an operating budget with item 56. This will be spun as being something other than what it is. I support workers, I support the employees of the city of Akron and our many fine projects, and always have. That's not what this is. This is about being able to see and understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sala. I did not see order of hands up, but I will come to Ms. Amobian since you are a committee member. And then Mr. Neal, excuse me, Mr. Neal, I'll come to you. Ms. Amobian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I, too, have heard my colleagues, and I certainly agree with the points they made. I guess what I find so troubling, and this is just my take, is that we request information, at least I have requested information, that has not been forthcoming. And if I don't identify it correctly in the written document that I used to request it, I get absolutely nothing back. So let me just share with you my take on this. Now that we have learned what we have abdicated, I think that we should trust one another and walk down this path together and figure out what is actually needed for you to do your jobs. So I too would like you to remove it from the budget, and then as we walk down this path together, you let us know, because we meet weekly, as I've stated. And no one has really clearly identified any urgency in these professional services agreements or contracts. And some of them I find terribly troubling, and I truly don't understand how you can negotiate JEDs one after another, and they can be so unique, worth $155,000. I know most of the people that have talked to me over the last week, they have continuously said, you know, this pay-to-play thing downtown has to stop. And when I asked for an example last week of what's the worst thing, and I was serious about that could happen from week to week, no one has been able to give an example of what would prevent you from doing your job. And the more I hear about some of these contracts, the more troubling they are to me, that they're not open to us and not open to the public for review or just to know that they exist. And you feel like you're pulling teeth in order to get information about them. We asked about the group, the Gateway Group, I think that's what it's called, last week. And you didn't know anything last week to share with us, and I don't hear anybody talking this week about what kind of services are they providing, what is the nature of the business, and I have yet to hear that. And let me just state this too, that I find awfully troubling, is that we put on paper that we're doing something about Elevate Akron. No one comes with a report to tell us, to show us the metrics that you're using to show us that you're moving the needle around that area, which is so disturbing. And then you have all these professional services contracts, and who knows, there may be some African Americans out there or other minority groups who can provide some of these services, but they don't know that you have a need for these services. So I am deeply troubled by this, and now that I know what we should be doing, I'm willing to take on my responsibility and ask that we travel this path together and trust one another that we're going to walk in truth and in light, and then we're going to move together and make whatever changes necessary. So I thank you for being patient, and hopefully we can do this together and see everything that is spent above the $50,000. So again, I thank you for your work, but I certainly cannot sign on to this today without taking that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Amobi, and now I'll come to you, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with my colleagues in regards to the concerns about Section 56, but mine go even a little bit deeper. We are, I don't know how many years now into this report from the Brookings Institute about racism, institutional racism, and its impact on our policies and practices, things that existed long before many of us were even on this council. But we were notified, and we were charged to address them. I've asked, since learning about equity and what it means and how it needs to be measured, for us to come up with standards so that we can see if the policies and practices that we put forth are equitable, and so that we can measure their impact. We have yet to do that as a council and as a team between council and administration. There is no way for me to see inside this budget, with the budget, and God knows with the ARPA dollars, if there is true equitable investment and spending. There is nothing based on what we say is our plan to address equity with the ARPA dollars. Nothing in this budget that I can see that financially, that is a line item in the budget stream that supports the sustainable work. For that, I can't support this budget. You all know my position, because for the past, God knows how long, have brought before this council to put the budget online. And it's become a game. We've had the gentleman who created the software come. It wasn't going to cost our city anything. They were going to work with us. It is one of the best practices that is outlined in the ARPA process. And this discussion that we're having about transparency and being able to do all this stuff, we would have a tool to where this even wouldn't be a question, because that would be in place. We'd be able to engage our constituents. But that hasn't happened. And then I find it ironic that just a couple weeks back, a resolution that was brought in on behalf of our constituents, stating that they had concerns, a lack of trust, not just amongst our constituents, but by our community business partners as well. And we received emails, all of us have received emails from both, asking us to just put ourselves through the same process we put our police department through, to audit our policies, practices, and procedures. And what do I hear today? The desire from many on council that we audit our policies, practices, and procedures. Not because we're saying, look, this city was under almost 30 years of one administration, and now 8 years of a second. And yes, we've had a Blue Ribbon Task Force, but there wasn't a real audit of our process procedures. It's just good business. No one, if someone's going to buy a company, when there's a corporate merger, you audit the books to make sure that what is being presented is what it is. It's not because you don't trust them, it's just basic business practice. For almost 40 years now, this city has gone without any kind of audit. And thank God for now, we're asking for questions. And I I see the question, I see the shaking your heads when I say no audit. But here we are talking about Section 56, and everybody's like, we're asking something that's out of the norm for council to have the ability to just do its job. To do its job, which is to have oversight of the budget. So, for those reasons I can't support, but here's the other one. My colleagues on council, we don't even know our own budget. In the midst of the worst crime spree, murder rates in a string of years in this city's history, the concerns with the environment, the concerns with housing, I challenge my colleagues to take a look at what are our goals and objectives as council. To improve our social media presence, nothing dealing with safety, nothing dealing with housing, nothing dealing with the environment. And we haven't even discussed our own budget. So for all of those reasons, there is no way I can improve this budget. Not just Section 56. This body needs a total retool on how we even evaluate the budget and understanding our responsibilities to our constituents. Because like my colleagues, the folks in my ward have a lot of questions. The only thing that gets me off the hook with them is they know that I've been bringing before this body year after year after year after year, us putting our budget online. And for us to take the suggestion of our own finance director to be educated by the same government best practice body that educates his people to understand how to do the budget. But the last time that came before council voted it down.
Okay. So, Mr. Neal,
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
you probably didn't hear the time.
I can't support this.
Okay.
I can't vote for it.
Okay, thank you. And I will come now to Ms. Mosley.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind the finance department, there were a few things that I had requested prior to today. I have not received them. I asked for the service contracts from one of the items on page 141. I wanted the service contracts prior to us having a vote. I also requested any pending lawsuit payouts that we may have had, requested that as well on the floor during our maybe day one of our budget hearings. Because of that, and many other reasons, I definitely can't support the budget. I think that just as easy as we were able to find $500,000 for the RIP medical debt, and to find funding for the software for the housing, to pull item 56 out of the budget should have been just as easy. We're not talking about pulling everything under $50,000. We're talking about consulting contracts over $50,000. That seemed very reasonable to do, especially when there's so many questions. It speaks to us as a body if we vote yes on this, knowing that there's concerns out here in our community with our constituents and with the people that we all represent. It is problematic for us to say what has been going on for the last 57 years is okay, and we have an opportunity to change it and add transparency. And so that reason alone and many others, I can't support it, but I would like to put on the record as well that I did request the last 10 years of consulting contracts out of item 56, so I appreciate if someone could compile those and get those over to us as well. I do hope that the residents know, especially our city employees, this is no reflection on them. This is not about trying to keep people from being paid because one has nothing to do with the other. I think that's out there in the atmosphere that people won't receive their paychecks if we don't vote on this budget. I think we just have to have a lot more transparency and honesty when we're passing things because the residents, they are demanding it. They're not asking, they're demanding it. So again, those items that I've requested over the past 2 weeks and some as late as yesterday, if you could get those to me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor.
just shortly, I mean, there's a number of notions that I would disagree with. One, the notion that this is somehow pay to stay, and to say that on the record is patently false. We are audited every single year, both financially, and I've undertaken a number of audit procedures under almost every department within the city administration. So has it included council? No, that's a separate legislative body to be able to do that. So we could go 10 rounds on something of whether we have done something or not. And it is a little bit more complex than just saying, hey, we can just take it out. There is, and that's just an acknowledgement of that. And to say that we've always done things one way and let's just continue to do it, okay, I can agree on that part, but it does take some unwinding to do, which it does require, I think, if we want to walk down this road together with council and with the administration, there shouldn't be much of a problem of supporting a resolution to be able to say, hey, how do we unwind these? And these are the true emergencies. These are the things that we need to do. And any number of those groups that you had talked about, the JEDs, you know, like I said, we could do, I think, a lot more of this about how valuable they've been and whether this contract is worth that person. And it does take a while to compile some of those things, Councilwoman Mosley, just because you've asked for some years to go back, and it's not hitting a button. There are paper things that need to be researched, and whether there are contracts and whether there are some legal parts of that too, being able to provide that. It's not, it just takes a little bit of time. Either way, it is a real notion come Friday at midnight. You know, if you don't pass a budget, that these things will not happen. You know, there's a number of different things across the city that just won't happen because we haven't passed a budget. So I certainly, I think the resolution speaks to that. Certainly, it wasn't easy to find $500,000 for medical debt relief either. And I think there's a number of notions around how important that is at this particular point. That being said, it was a will of council to be able to find it, and so how they want to go back down that and how they want to provide that service, it's going to take an infrastructure to do that. But that speaks to the resolution and to the ordinance. This is about the budget. Thanks.
I see Ms. Amobian's hand.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I just wanted to use that as an example, Mr. Mayor, the JED contract. And again, you know, I don't do the work every day, but I'm just hard pressed to understand why something that we do once a year, once every other year, whatever frequency, why can't somebody on staff learn how to do that? It can't be changing that much, the terms of that process. I realize that we're talking about water, we're talking about anything that's built on the land, that we get a percentage of the taxes and all of that. All of those things are so true. I just have a hard time understanding why we haven't had somebody on staff to learn how to do that. And whether it's been, you know, $155,000, we could repair 10 homes probably with that kind of money. So, you know, it's those kinds of things that I find troubling. And then somebody throws out that we should, you know, we can request anything. How do you request something that you don't even know exists? So it's kind of hard. And then every time we request something, we're always talking about the fact that we have no manpower to do the work or to do the heavy lifting of copying or whatever the case may be. You know, for what I'm requesting, I will pay a temporary office helper to come in and copy what I need, because I've asked for the last 5 years, but Councilwoman asked for the last 10, so, you know, that would supersede what I want, and at least we'll be getting the same thing. But I don't understand why it's always that delay every time we ask for something. And if I don't ask for it just right in the email, I don't get anything. But not only that, I don't even know why as a council person that we have to put something in writing together. You know, a verbal request is just simply not enough. That makes no sense to me, but since we have to go down this path, you know, we try to do that, and we still get nothing back. So I have a hard time understanding what we are spending time talking about. And the more difficult you make this in terms of trying to explain why you need this, the more troubling I find this.
Thank you, Ms. Mobian.
Not trying to explain why we need it, just trying to give an example of what may what may be happening in your request. And it's not like there are people waiting around waiting for those requests to do it. They do come in line, but we do take this serious. We do take requests from council seriously, but it needs to be some sort of tracking mechanism too, to say, this is when the person asked for it. This is what needs to be done. It's a little more complex than just that, but I'm not trying harder to justify the issuance of it. I'm trying to get a budget passed so we can work through some of that Section 56 as the administration, as council, to find a best path forward. That's all.
Ms. Holland, and then Mr. Malik.
So respectfully to all involved, both the requester and those who would satisfy such a request, the problem in having what seem to be ever heightening requirements about how one requests documents and records and how one must go about asking for these things. The problem with that and the problem with delays in responding is that this in itself contributes to a climate of mistrust. That this in itself suggests that there is something going on, even in the absence of something going on. Now, you know, let's assume for one hot minute that there could really be an honest belief in this room that it's a good idea to carry forward with Section 56 as though none of these conversations had ever happened. Let's just say for argument that anybody in this room could pass the straight face test on that. Now, the problem is that it's really apparently difficult to even get a good look, or at least a reasonably quick look, at what these records are and what they reflect, which is kind of the heart of the matter. I think these things live in connection with each other. The concern that I'm hearing from Ward 1 residents is that not only do they not understand what happened, what decision was made and why, but there appears to be difficulty in accessing the information even after it happened. So this is concerning too, and respectfully, I don't think a study group or a debate around that changes that fundamental condition. Thanks.
Thank you. And then we'll come to Mr. Malik.
Yes, I appreciate all of the comments that were made. I guess have a simple question. If the administration is committing not to bring contracts under using that language, you know, is committing to bring those before council to review and approve, then what is the use or value of keeping that language in, right? Ostensibly, the point of this resolution is for council and the administration to create a working group that will either provide, you know, some updated thing that could come before us in the future as an ordinance, and then we could use that process. But if the administration, I guess this is for you, Mr. Fricker, for the mayor, if the point is not to rely on that language, then why leave that language in the budget?
So I think we could talk about this. I would prefer to wait until we introduce the next piece, which speaks specifically to this, and then I will address that question. Is that fair? So we have a resolution coming in that's item 1 on the new business that speaks to this entire conversation that we're having, and I think I could address that at that point.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept this item?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve, and I will go ahead and second. All in favor of approval, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, if we could have a roll call?
Freeman.
Aye.
Amobian.
Nay.
Malik.
Nay.
Baylor.
Aye.
Lombardo.
Aye.
The motion passes 3-2.
Okay, thank you. Next, under old business and ordinance, to make the annual appropriation for the current expenses and other expenditures and capital outlays of the city of Akron for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are requesting passage as this is the 4th reading of this ordinance.
Okay. Questions or comments? Okay, do I have a motion to accept?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, roll call, please.
Freeman.
Aye.
Amobian.
Nay.
Malik.
Nay.
Baylor.
Aye.
Lombardo.
Aye.
The motion passes 3 to 2.
Okay, now we move into, excuse me, our new business. We have a resolution urging the city administration to collaborate with Akron City Council regarding future revision to existing Section 56 of the 2023 budget ordinance regarding professional service contracts and declaring an emergency.
So first, I will defer to Councilman Fusco as one of the sponsors of this resolution.
Mr. Fusco?
Thank you. I do believe that it is prudent for council as well as administration to study this. I understand the thoughts behind the urgency, I guess, given where we're at in terms of the budgetary process and the electoral process. But the thing of it is, I believe that we would be, this is a significant change in the way that these services are delivered and the way the business of the city is conducted. I believe it'll be harmful if council is not truly educated in the way this business is done, this work is done. This disservice to the good people that does the work every day. A significant change without a plan. Those managers, people who do the work every day, it would be very difficult for them to adapt. Okay, for a short run, I understand in terms of the administration saying, let's work on this and let's come up with an educated plan. Part of this that I'm hearing is the piece about transparency. That's understandable. All of our budgets are online. The personal service pieces are not. But let's work together to figure that piece out. If that's part of the plan here. It's been stated in the public domain that none of these are bid, none of these are bid whatsoever. That's inaccurate. It's inaccurate. And so I think a lot of these rumors need to be dispelled. Again, the budget is online. We are rated, we are audited every year for the last 60 years by the state of Ohio. We are also, I believe, quarterly or maybe even daily, we are rated in our performance budgetarily. And I just believe that this is a prudent way to go forward. There's been some questions and concerns that has been brought up. I ask that we respectfully debate these issues and these questions, but I just believe that this would be a prudent way to go forward, to discuss this. And I believe that some of council, they don't understand exactly how this works. And some do understand how this works, I believe, I hope, because some people have been here for some time. And it's just surprising that some of this isn't coming forward. So anyways, no, I stand in support of this. Thank you.
Mr. Fricker.
So, I think from the administration's perspective, we can sum this up fairly simply that there's been discussion about Section 56. That's been a topic of discussion, obviously, at this budget hearing. There's a large number of members of council that think that language should be modified or removed. The administration agrees. We think that language should not exist as it does going forward. It's been there, as we've talked about, for 60-some years. We are simply asking for a month or two to be able to talk to our managers and employees that have existed in these divisions under this framework that we've had for 60 years, ask them to weigh in. Maybe this impacts, our time frame. A lot of the dollars that we're talking about here are related to our capital projects. So these are our design contracts for these. It's a very complicated process that our engineering bureau goes through to design these projects. If you've ever looked at the spec documents for one of those projects, they're in the hundreds of pages, very complicated stuff. We're simply asking for some time to work with them, to get their thoughts. Maybe there's some alternatives to, instead of having this language in section 56, which I think we all agree is no longer appropriate, maybe there are some options for putting language in the capital budget regarding the capital projects that are being passed and the design of those projects. There's a lot of options here. I've heard everything, so we've had this discussion about, some people have proposed removing the language entirely. I've also, Councilwoman Hollins submitted some language that, basically talks about modifying the limits of what would come to council. So it's not, a binary choice. There's some options that we have, and we simply want some time to work through those options and figure out what the best thing going forward is. It's the administration working with council to come up with what is the best solution.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Holland, out of deference to the committee members, I'll come to Ms. Amobi. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Respectfully, I'd like to address what was just said to me. So,
Okay, proceed.
thank you so much. Mr. Fricker, just point of information, I just want to make sure I understand what you just said. It is your contention that the administration agrees that Section 56 should go?
We agree that it should not exist in its current form. We want time to figure out what that form should be.
And did I understand the second part accurately? I'm just trying for clarity here, that there are one or more service or consulting agreements going on right now, which removal would affect. Am I following you?
I think what we want to do is learn what the, and I've heard it well documented from our service director and from people in the engineering bureau. We have a process in place that we've been following based on the language that's in Section 56 right now. Is that fair that, basically that we've, for lack of a better, Section 56 has been there, so our process has developed around that. We're simply looking for some time for them to weigh in on how would it impact them, how can they change their process if we're working with a new framework where we are now bringing all of these contracts to City Council.
Okay, and I think it's fair to say, I don't want to speak for, for others, and yet I think it's fair to say here that the concern heard round the room is not for Mr. Luttle's periodic need for water main replacement or for a boiler that has failed or a roof. I don't think that's the concern, because week in and week out, this council sees these very contracts come in. I don't think that's what we're talking about, are we?
In terms of the dollar value of the contracts that have been talked about, that's the vast majority of it, yes.
No, Mr. Fricker, I think maybe we're not on the same page, and I just want some clarity because you directed a comment at me about some of my suggestions. So I think the concern is really about consulting and personal service contracts for which there's never any process that council gets to see about, see what this is for, to understand what the need is, and to otherwise exercise its charter-given authority to weigh in on contracts over 50,000. Do you get what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. Let's be clear, though, that so these numbers that have been thrown around, about $120 million, a very small portion of that are the contracts that you're talking about right now. In terms of the dollar value of the consulting contracts, that's a very, very
I'm
small
sorry.
percentage of those.
I'm going to suggest we clear it up right now. How much of the 120 million for the past 2 years
I don't have
were
an exact
service and
figure on that.
consulting agreements?
I can just tell you that, when I look at that list, the list that I provided, the large dollar amounts are predominantly the design contracts.
Gateway. I'm doing this from memory, so forgive me. Gateway.
I've been using Gateway,
agreement.
I'll jump in. I've been using
Yeah.
Gateway since 2015 on a number of, including the Blue Ribbon Task Force, on a number of issues either in and around economic development or watershed and a number of things too. And I'll boil it down to this. We're asking for a 2-month, I think it's a reasonable request to ask for a couple of months to unwind some of these things and to look at it. And not to say that all of your concerns are accurate or inaccurate, and not to say that, the way we've done it is just the way we should do it all the time. I don't think an unreasonable request on asking for a couple of months on the either personal cyber side. There are some things, whether it's design, whether it's emergency legal opinion, that maybe we don't have, the necessary legal, and you guys know this better than I, on that side, the expertise to be able to do that part of it, and do need to contract out, because we do have cases at the Ohio Supreme Court. We do have cases at the U.S. Supreme Court. I know we have a lot of great lawyers, but I'm not so sure somebody's been before the U.S. Supreme Court. So there's a number of those things, and it's a reasonable request to ask for maybe a couple of months to unwind that. And at some particular point, somebody's going to have a way to do things that are different. You know what I mean? In 9 months, so to speak. And I don't have any problem to ask for that reasonable request to be able to unwind some of that. So.
Yeah, then I do need to, I do need to jump up on the
I'll
screen.
keep it brief, I promise. May I suggest then that if 2 months is what's needed, that we build it into the, well, but I'm suggesting that we actually include it in the language of Section 56.
I don't know what you mean by that, just because I'm a little dense on some things, and don't quote me, but the resolution calls for a April, May, kind of June 1st, I don't have it in front of me on that side of it too, but it calls for a working group to unwind some of those things.
Yes, and respectfully, Mr. Mayor, I understand, okay? And I hope that my submitted suggestions reflect that I understand, okay? But the problem here, this is not point of view Nancy Holland. This is point of view the residents of Ward 1, many of whom have reached out to me. So what I'm looking to do is to build in some assurance here. Actually in Section 56 itself, that this stops on a date certain. And now I'm going to be quiet because I promised the chair.
I will come to President Somerville, and then I'm going to come to Ms. Amobian.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that we have heard concerns expressed regarding Section 56, and I do believe that Akron City Council has a responsibility to take a deeper look at professional service contracts. It is clear, just by our conversations today, that there are still many questions, right? And understandably so. Council needs to look at current and past budgeting and expenditure practices. There is an opportunity here, and I don't think that we should pass that up, where we can really raise the bar in terms of transparency and accountability around our budgeting process. And we can find ways to better engage our residents. I do believe that it's very difficult, and we're not doing ourselves a service when we look at a practice that has been in place for 60 plus years potentially, and think that we can discuss that in a week or two. And before we stop something, right, we should have a plan process of how we move forward so that our different departments can continue to do the work that they do. And I think, again, this resolution is just asking council to have this conversation, allowing council to be educated around this topic as we also educate our residents. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and I'll just, for everybody's sake, here's the order I'm going to go in. I'm going to go to Ms. Amobian, then I'm going to come over to Mr. Malik, because you are on the committee, and then I will come to Tara, and then I'll come to Mr. Neal, and that's the way we'll go. So, Ms. Amobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we are talking about this particular amendment that was just read in, there are two areas I have problems with this, and I'll point those out. But let me just say this. If we're talking about working together over the next 2 months, why can't we pass the budget with the expectation that we take out 56, and within 2 months we come back with a fully prepared budget to operate? We don't have to have it in there while we're working on this. And then I see here, and this is what troubles me, when you look at the second whereas, it says, open to review upon request. You take that out right away. It should be something that is provided to council monthly, quarterly, whatever we tend to agree upon. We don't have to request it. This comes to us automatically. And then you go down further, the second, I think it's the second whereas from the bottom, ongoing discussion with leadership. No, this has to be with council and not just with leadership and administration. I want to be involved in those discussions, and I think many of us want to be involved. So we don't need to have, this ongoing discussion, because I can tell you now that, Mr. Fusco has been trying so hard to get us to understand his way of understanding the budget that I don't want Mr. Fusco trying to interpret anything for me. I want to be at the table to talk about this. This is disturbing to me. It's disturbing because everybody I've come in contact with, I'm telling you, the people don't believe that this has been going on that long, and they don't believe that we're going to fix it, even down the road. So we really need to take our time and look at this. And for those of us with current, concerns, to be at the table to talk about them. Because this amendment is troubling as well. But I want us to go down, and that's why I suggested, let's go down this path together. Let's trust one another together as we look at what we've been doing and develop a plan together where we are trusting each other and not you asking us to just trust you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll come to Mr. Malik.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Not to belabor the point, but just wanted to return to my question before, right? If the administration, I really want to know, if the administration does not want to rely on the language, Section 56, and is going to bring contracts above $50,000 to council, then what is the point of that language?
We want to,
You're good.
as I said, we want to have our departments weigh in on how this would impact their process. We also want to discuss if there's any items that we feel that should have specific language around them. Those are our reasons.
Okay, I guess I would just make one final comment, and really then I'm done. If right now we are on track to pass the budget tonight with Section 56 in it, right? If then in 2 months we are not able to come up with a better process or better solution, Section 56 still can be relied upon. I think that's the concern that all of us share.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. And I will come to Ms. Mosley.
Thank you, Chairman Freeman. A question for you, Steve or Mike. I hear you keep referring to departments and process, and I'm just trying to understand, what does city departments and managers have to do with consulting contracts and personal service? We're specifically talking about consulting contracts going out, at least that's my understanding. The ones that are coming in over 50,000 are not coming to council. Not talking about anything that's coming through public service, or even when we have things that come through like for Oriana and things like that. Those things come to us. We see those. But I'm talking about, and I'm sure my colleagues are too, consulting contracts over 50,000. That is the issue here. We have a system that is circumventing council, and this is our duty as elected officials to agree and vote on these contracts. We're not saying that the consultants that these contracts are going to are an issue. We're just saying it should come to us. So great that there's a resolution here, but it's still not addressing the issue. I think I'm pretty educated on things because I read a lot, and what I'm reading right now is employees are being told we're going to kill or try to kill a budget that will affect them, and that is not the purpose of what we're talking about. We were specifically talking about consulting contracts, and a lot of these consultants have been given quite a lot of money. Now you're saying it's not the whole $121 million, so give us the breakdown. Tell us which ones are the actual consultant contracts and how much that total is versus the things that are actually coming to council. And so I appreciate the resolution. There's some problematic issues in there. I just don't see what the big deal is about removing item 56 where it talks about consulting contracts over $50,000. It just seems like that would be something very simple to do as you all work through the process of talking about something that existed for 57 years. It seems like this is something that we should want to do if our residents in this community, they have pause for what is going on down here because, again, they think there's something illegal going on. And we're not saying that it's illegal, we're just saying allow us to do our jobs. Bring it to us so we can put our eyes on it. So now we can actually be helpmates when we're talking to our residents about a consulting contract. We're not helpmates right now. Because all they see is what the paper printed, what a lot of past council members didn't even realize were going on, because I've talked to some of them, and it's problematic for us as a community and as a city. So we can keep talking about transparency. This resolution is not adding transparency. It's just giving more concern to the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll come to Mr. Neal and then to President Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There seems to be a concern on what the process would be if we remove Section 56, and that we've been doing this for 60 years. Well, folks, this city is over 200 years old. You know what will happen if we remove Section 56? The legislative body will be able to function the way it's supposed to. That's what happened. For 60 years, there's been a systemic practice that has created this distrust. Because what we're talking about right now, there is distrust between our constituents, and there's obviously distrust between the administration and council. We gave you not we. A number of council members gave you full oversight of $175 million. Unprecedented. And what will our city say happened between this administration and this council years from now? Did that $175 million change the systemic disparities in this community? Right now, I don't see it. But I pray that's an investment and just not expenditure of dollars. So council, the administration had $175 million that was supposed to come back before us, we were told. But all we do is see how it's been spent. We've had no say. So here we are saying, just let us do what is our legislative right, duty, obligation for the 200 plus years of this city's lifespan, all but for 60. Council had been given over their powers, misled to give over their powers. I don't know, because I don't know all that was in place that brought that 56 in to where council felt the mayor had to do it. I don't know if it was the fear of the 68 riots or what, I don't know what it was. But I do know what it is right now. There is a lack of trust. And I want to get back to this. The administration has $175 million. We are forced to trust you. It is our legislative right and responsibility to have oversight of the city's budget. Trust us that we will work with you going forward. There is no way, and to say, this thing about leadership keeps coming up, remember this, leadership works at the pleasure of council. Council doesn't work at the pleasure of leadership. And we've seen already that we're in this site because questions have been brought before the budget committee, and they've been pushed aside, squashed, that could have prevented us from being in this situation, and have been brought on the floor. And council, if we want to use the term leadership, hasn't done anything. And council as a whole hasn't done anything. So let me just end with this. What we are talking about is trust, plain and simple. The administration, again, has $175 million, million that this group has no say over. What we are asking is what is in every legislative body's right, be it city council, state legislators, or our congressional legislators, and that is to have oversight of the budget so that we can represent our constituents in the right manner.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Now I'll come to President Somerville.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I want to be very clear and want to refer city council members to look at the resolution. We have created a special committee under Rule 3.2, which all council members will be able to participate in, just as we do all the other committees that are brought forth before council. This is the committee, just like the committee that we're in right now. So I just want to make that very clear, that this is not something that all of council cannot participate in and make sure that their voices are heard or making sure that they're at the table. We are creating a special committee to have these conversations transparently in front of Akron residents.
Thank you, President Somerville. I'll come to Councilwoman Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I appreciate all these comments, and I'd like to just make one very specific point about some things that Councilman Neal said. You know, not only is it our right as the legislature, it's our duty. Okay, so we're not really talking about some sort of power grab here. What this really is about is fulfilling our responsibility. So this isn't about flexing. This is about following the charter, and with all due respect to the president of council, is it really necessary for us to have a task force or a working group? Or could we just read our charter? One provision, Section 95, okay? One provision, which simply says it's our job to review contracts over $50,000. So I'm not talking about, you know, hey, let's stake out some new territory here. I'm talking about doing what we're supposed to do. I'm talking about doing the responsible thing. And so there's been some hemming and hawing and some, I think that we're feeling awkward here, and rightfully so. This is awkward. But the thing of it is that part of the checks and balance of government is that we're supposed to see and understand spending decisions above a certain amount, just so that we can make sure that the smell test is passed, that we can make sure that the other values that are expressed in our city charter are followed. It's super basic. Madam President, respectfully, we do not need a task force. We need to follow our charter. Full stop.
Thank you. And I will come to Mr. Fusco.
Yeah, at the beginning of this, I respectfully requested a civil discourse. I'm going to also respectfully request that we take time, and so that maybe everyone can kind of cool off here. I think at the end of the day here, we're all wanting the same thing. I think we are all wanting the same thing, but unfortunately, we're just going to have to work on it and figure out exactly how to get there. I believe the administration has reached out and willing to work with council. What I find striking, though, what's interesting to me, some folks, have been here for year after year after year, and I'm very glad that people listen to my interpretation of the budget process, et cetera. But and we vote on these projects year after year after year. And we see it's broken down in cost centers, and we know how much is being spent for every project out there. It's broken down. Am I right, Mr. Fricker? It's broken down for every project. How much goes into engineering? And we've also, Mr. Luddle has talked before this council. He has talked before this council in terms of the process that he and his staff goes through, and that's the majority of what we're talking about. The majority of what we're talking about is the expenditures for these massive projects that we've got to go through. That process is called the qualified base selection. He's talked about it. It's ORC 153.69 for our friends who are in the legal profession to read also. But what we're saying is let's go ahead and go on this journey together. Let's go ahead and discuss ways that we could be more transparent, whereas council can have a part of this discussion whenever these are selected or what have you. But this is the first step in that. But obviously, as I said at the beginning, I was hoping that we could have a nice discussion about it, but apparently not. And so I'm going to just ask for time so we can move on. Thank you.
I'll come to Ms. Amobian, then I'll come to President Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a question raised a few minutes ago, and let me just ask it one more time. Are you currently reviewing professional services contracts that you are considering now?
Yes, there's professional service contracts all the time. They're sitting in my office. Yeah.
Excuse me for cutting you off, Mr. Berger. So if you are doing that now, why can't we bring those to the table and we can start this conversation now?
So
if transparency is okay and there's nothing hidden about any of this, let's start it today. But I still agree that we can walk down this path together and trust one another that we're going to do what's best for the citizens of Akron, because that's all I'm interested in. I'm not interested in these games about being out here for years. If I had known about these contracts from years ago, I'd be asking the same question then. A lot of these we just did not know about, okay? And there were reasons why I believe that we did not know. Thank you.
Thank you. President Somerville.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Just in response to Councilwoman Holland, I want to make it very, very clear. This is not a task force. This is not a working group. This is a special committee that we are putting together. Again, we know there's a lot of questions. We have council members who have just requested information. Okay? And those questions need and should be answered and addressed. And we plan to do that in a public way, in a special committee, to address those issues. And just as you have submitted some revisions, we should have some conversations based upon some of the things that you've also suggested.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, yes.
Point of personal privilege, thank you. So look, Ohio Revised Code Section 149.43 is better known as the Ohio Public Records Act. And with all due respect, there's no need to have a special meeting or a special session or a task force or whatever to provide the information that's been requested today or ever. So, respectfully, this is a time waster, and it's being done on the backs of the taxpayers. The citizens deserve to have the information now, and y'all leave me with no other course of action here. I'm not here for me. I'm here for the residents of Ward 1. And I've heard from so many who are so disturbed about Section 56. So you can call it a task force or a discussion group or whatever, but Ohio law has settled what we do about people, members of council today or ever, requesting information. They get that information unless it is subject to one of a certain number of limitations or privileges. So respectfully, the administration has to give this this material that's been requested, and they have to do it with all due speed. So, again, I'm scratching my head. How is it that we're being asked to just one more year? I mean, it's been 60, what's another year? To give up our legislative responsibility just one more time. It doesn't make any sense to the members of my community and our greater community. I'm just here to tell you that. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, two things. One, 14943 also says the word reasonable, so there's a reasonable amount of time to be able to fulfill that record's request. Okay, and whether it's a day or a week, whatever it is to compile that. Number two, let's not qualify that as, hey, to me it's a little cavalier than just saying, hey, we want one more year. We're asking for a reasonable amount of time to unwind some of these things. I think somebody on screen said we're kind of trying to get to the same place, but there's not, the suggestion that we just want to do it one more year because that's what we have. That's not it at all. It's about trying to unwind some of these things that are fairly complex. And you can talk about the public records part of it, but if you're requesting something, there is a certain amount of time to be able to fulfill that request too. It's not an immediate, you cannot push a button on some of these things that go back a certain number of years. So I just don't want to get the notion out there that it's that cavalier. It's not.
Mr. Malik?
I don't want to cut off further discussion, but I did, the sponsor wanted to make a motion for time, so unless there are other comments, I want to make a motion for time.
Okay, we have a motion for time. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of time, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll take time on that. And next we have an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the provision of medical debt relief services for the purpose of providing Akron residents relief from the burden of excessive medical debt and declaring an emergency.
So I will defer to the sponsors of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Who'd like to speak for us?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I will begin if that's possible. Again, what you have before you is what we've been talking about over the past few weeks, and this is putting forth $500,000 towards medical debt relief. And I think it was said that, it was easy for us to find $500,000. No, it was not easy. Again, this work didn't start last week, 2 weeks ago. It started months ago, right? And so before you see that, and this is a real commitment to make this work. We have talked about how we have a real opportunity to impact and change people's lives here. And so we're doing that by putting forth this ordinance on today. So again, I also just want to thank Councilman Fusco for helping to find the funds. Also want to thank Councilwoman Holland for all of her work in bringing this to our attention.
Thank you. Councilwoman Holland, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to all involved within the city of Akron for bringing this forward. Sometimes a good thing just kind of carries itself. But so much time and research did go into this. And I guess on a personal level, for me, it's just been a great labor of love. And I'd like to invite two of my new friends who are in the room, and I'm wondering what happened to Mike. Mike has disappeared, but I would invite James and Max to rise and take a bow. These two men are future doctors and real healers. And, you know, a shameless plug for the future of medical care in America, we hope. These two and their colleagues from SNAP at NeoMed are championing, and they do this in their free time, okay? They are championing the crazy idea that access to health care and that the ability to get the care we need and to do so without losing everything, okay? This crazy idea that this is a human right and one worth fighting for. So I am deeply grateful for the work of this crew. They've become my friends, and it's been a real honor. So all tribute.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Holland, and I will come to, I don't see anybody else in the chambers, I'll come to Ms. Amobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank you for finding those dollars for the medical debt relief. Now I'm wondering, where do we find the money from? If someone could share that with us. You don't have to tell me today. You can let me know through email or whatever, because I want to know, because I want us to find more money for home repairs. Do we need all the senior citizens who are in need of these repairs to come down here? Because we need to do a better job of repairing some of these homes that these people are living in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I like my colleague, Ms. Mobian, have some concern with the word fine. You just don't fine $500,000. We should know where it is in the budget, because if you take $500,000 from someplace, it's impacting something else. I know that this is a good cause, but how many years have we been talking about really addressing the gun violence in our community, and not a dime has come forward for that? And don't tell me what we gave to offer money to youth organizations. We give to youth organizations all the time. Our foundations give to youth organizations. To try to say that we're putting the responsibility for them to deal with yet another death in our community every week with gun violence, let's not play that game. So we fined $500,000 for medical debt relief. It's a good cause, but we can never find money to deal with the gun violence in our community. And let me remind you, this administration, 6 months in, had a giant press release in the corner of Ward 4 and Ward 3, but in my ward, had all the judges, all the state legislators, the sheriff, the police chief, talk about how violence was horrific in this community and how something needed to be done. And you know how much money has come to my ward? How much relief has come to my ward? Like I said, that community that showed up with so much pride, you know what tools they've been given to address what is a city problem? Nothing. Not a dime has been found. So I appreciate this, but I got a problem with finding stuff. We got to stop finding stuff and really go about budgeting and allocating. And I've got another problem. We've been talking about the racial disparity as outlined by the Brookings Institute, but nowhere in this budget does it outline anything to deal with any of those issues. This council declared racism a public health crisis. Nowhere in this budget is there anything to deal with any of those issues. And so I'll stop. But I have a problem when we can find things, and this seems like a political move to kind of get us off at 56. Hey, take this, we'll throw you this bone, and move on. And no disrespect to my colleague, Ms. Holland, and those who have worked hard on this, but I just find it how convenient to find $500,000 at this time with all the other things. I can imagine how the people with I'll stop, let me just stop.
Okay, looking for a motion to suspend the rules. Mr. Fusco, I do want to thank you. I know you guys work, to semantics, find the money, rearrange, whatever, but we're thankful for this and thankful for you guys just 1,000 thumbs up. So is there a motion to suspend the rules and issue a favorable report?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion to suspend the rules and issue a favorable report. All those in favor, please let it known, let it known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. And it is, I don't think we have anything else coming, 4:19, and we are adjourned. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Fricker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.
That is the final committee meeting of the day. Council will meet at 7 p.m. tonight. Thank you.